Well, welcome back to Barley and Hops. I'm George. Yes, this is the channel that dares to unlock the mysteries of home distilling. And we're going to take a step back in time and we're going to cover a topic we covered years ago, but it's time to do it again. Matter of fact, there's 2 points that we want to make today, and that is pH and what is my hydrometer really telling me?
Come all you moonshiners if you want to hear.
So now that you got through the introduction, of course, yes, we enjoy doing what we do and offering to you this service and answering all your questions. Please, if you have an opportunity, yes, please subscribe. I understand if you think you're on Uncle Sam's radar and you don't want to subscribe, let your conscience be your guide. Sometimes we are a bit too careful for our own good, but I perfectly understand. Actually, I had someone tell me they didn't want to send me an email because they'd rather talk to me over the phone because they figured Uncle Sam would track them down. I don't know. All right, we're going to talk about pH. What is it? How do we adjust it? Why do we adjust it? And really, what is this explanation and why does it really make sense to me? We're going to talk about that, and then we're also going to talk about this elusive hydrometer that we use for our beer, wine, and spirits, our mash, because you know that the hydrometer we use after distillation is on a totally different scale. So let's get right to it. Boom! Where would we be without the whiteboard? That's right. We're going to talk about pH. Okay? And here's what we need to know about pH. pH is measured on a scale. Okay? It's measured on a scale from 7 to 14 or 7 down to 0. So 7 being your central neutral data point. Okay? So far, so good? It's really, really easy when you can picture this. And it makes a lot of sense. Okay? Anything above 7 is base. Well, they like to call it base, since a lot of times you hear it referred to as alkaline. And anything below 7 is acidic. Not to be confused with acid in its pure sense of the term, although we use acid to drop the acidity, okay? It's actually a measurement of, it's the negative log measurement of hydrogen. You don't want to have that conversation either, do you? No, I don't. Look, and see, I already put somebody, I can tell, I put somebody to sleep already. I'm not going down that road, okay? It's a long discussion, but just believe the math is there. It works, okay? And this is a universal scale. Now, 7 is neutral. What do we find that's neutral in the environment? Well, not really in the environment, but at the grocery store, you'll find distilled water. In a lot of cases is neutral, okay? Your municipality or your city water, or wherever it is you are, I'm not talking about well water. Well water has its own pH, and you can measure it to find out what it is. But city waters usually run anywhere between like 7.4 and 8.6, somewhere in that neighborhood. For some reason, and I'm sure there's a really, really good explanation that I want to get into, but after the processing, clarifying, cleaning, filtering, and then they push it back out, it's at a base, and it's not acidic. Okay? This is, matter of fact, 8 is seawater. And if you look way up here on the scale, 14, that'd be drain cleaner, Clorox bleach. Those are really, really alkaline. Now, when we're talking about acidity level and we start to work our way down, from many, many other videos, you should already know this, and I'll ask the question, what is our goal or our sweet spot for yeast activity? I'll give you a couple seconds. And you should be shouting it out. 5.2. That's right here. 5.2 is our sweet spot for yeast activity. Now, why is that the case? Well, that is the case because yeast, or you want to try to create an environment, the lower pH in acidic environment does a couple of things for you. One, it acts like almost like a sterilizer, and it keeps other bacteria and things from growing that you don't want in there. But it sets up the environment for yeast to start to propagate in your mash or your wash and do it at an efficient level because they really, really enjoy an acidic level. Now, they can survive, a yeast can survive down to about 2, but please don't do that. We don't want to get that low. You don't want, see, now you're adding another complexity and you're starting to stress out your yeast. And wow, when you do that, your yeast will start to do things that you don't intend them to do, okay? So let's stay away from that. But you measure it to 5.2. Now, here's what we need to know, though. What magnitude? People say, well, what's the difference between 6 and 7? If 7 is neutral, how much acidic is 6 compared to 7? Well, it's 10 times more acidic. It's a log function. Well, what about 5 in comparison to 7? Well, that's 100 times more acidic. And then, of course, it goes to 1,000, and so on and so forth, okay? So, here's what we do. We need to know that 5.2 is our sweet spot, and that's what we're always looking for. And that's at the very beginning. And I need to explain this because I found out that this has a magnet in it. I'm used to reaching for it, and I just learned that yesterday. This happens often, all right? It's sort of like, it's just a misunderstanding because George didn't explain it well enough. And George is going to try to fix that right now. Got me talking to myself about myself in a third person. If you've got a mash that you're preparing, what I do, and you don't have to, remember, technique is one thing, process is something you don't violate. My technique is I'll measure my water that I start with and get that to 5.2. Okay? When is it important to be at 5.2? To me, it's at the beginning because it's a data point for me and I'll know what effect whatever I add to this is going to have to that water. So when you add grains, when you add cereals, when you add sugar, no matter what it is you add, it's going to have an effect on that water. And that pH is going to change. And when it does, I like to know where I started so I'll know what effect my grains had in the mash. I could wait until the very end after everything's finished and then make my adjustment. But when is it most important? Or no, when is it critical? It's critical to have the proper pH at one time and one time only. And that is prior to pitching yeast. Why? Because we want to make sure the environment is healthy for these little fellows right here. That's all there is to it, okay? Make it just as simple as possible. We want to make sure the environment is as healthy as we can possibly get it for these fellas. We want it at the right temperature, we want it at the right pH, we want the proper amount of nutrients in there. It could not be more easily explained than that. Now, somebody's going to miss this, and somebody's going to get confused all to hell. And it happens on a regular, unfortunately, and that's because I don't do a good enough job of explaining. Once you've adjusted to 5.2 and you've pitched your yeast, when do you check your pH? Any guesses? Never. It's not a factor any longer. It's no longer a factor once you've adjusted pH and pitched your yeast. Boom, you're done. Why is that? Well, because, your yeast are going to eat, right? They're going to poop out CO2. They're going to piss out some ethanol. They're also going to shoot out they're going to excrete some byproducts that you're not really going to be happy with. That's why they all settle to, but all of this is going to have an effect on your pH. And if you're constantly trying to chase that pH, then your yeast are creating what they're doing is adapting to their environment, and they're going to change that environment to suit their lifespan. And you're going to continue to change that environment. Don't do that. So never, you never have to adjust pH again. One time only. If you check the pH, don't adjust it. You can check it if you want to. that once your fermentation starts, you'll notice that your pH will start to drop. It'll start to drop. Hell, it may drop all the way down to 4.0. It may drop all the way down to here. Don't worry about it. Let it go. Okay? There are things in life that you just can't control. It's like taking a sleeping pill and a laxative at the same time. All right? Just let it go. All right. That brings us to fermentation. Yeah, I'll put that right there. One of the fermentation, there's a big challenge, all right? And again, it's maybe I haven't explained it well, but you know you have an airlock, and we've got a little bit of water in here. Oh, it's not there. There you go. And you've got water in there. And what happens is your CO2 escapes. Here's your bucket, fermenter, whatever you got. Your air escapes, and that closes off like a P-trap in a toilet or in a sewer system. That prevents gases from escaping. This prevents oxygen from getting back in and spoiling or oxidizing your mash. That's after your yeast have gone through their aerobic phase and they're into their anaerobic phase. Well, see, you're going to build up all that CO2 in here, and that's the way it's going to escape. But I hear often, I said, George, I don't see no bubbles in there, it ain't fermenting. Remember, an airlock is an indicator. It's not a gauge. It's not a gauge to tell you that fermentation is happening. It's an indicator. First of all, it tells you that you've got positive pressure in CO2, and second of all, it tells you you're in a sealed container. If your container's not sealed around the lid or around here, and you've got a small leak, CO2 is going to escape just like electricity does, path of least resistance, and you're not going to see any bubble activity, and you're going to swear it's not fermenting, when in fact, it is fermenting. How do we know? Well, we use our hydrometer, okay? We drop our hydrometer in to find out if it's fermenting. And if our hydrometer floats, that's a rudimentary hydrometer. If it floated here, and I'm going to use this as 1.085 just as an example. All right? Please don't home you pick the number. But it floats there at the beginning. It's known as your original gravity, your OG. Okay? And you drop the hydrometer in there, and now it's floating at 1.060. Well, you know that it's eating that much sugar. So you know it's fermenting. But I don't see no bubbles. Well, you don't see no bubbles because you got a leak. Okay? That's really what that's telling you. Now, we are all destined to get stuck and try to achieve 1.000 or lower, if at all possible. In some wines, you can really do that. You can get it down to 0.998, but not normally with a mash. And there's reasons for that, and we're going to cover that here now. But a lot of times, I'll get the email, a phone call, or a text, and it'll say, love it because they give me the data points. They give me the information. George, my original gravity is 1.085. My temp is 76 degrees Fahrenheit. Good. My pH was 5.2. Good. My final gravity is 1.1010. No matter what I do, it won't ferment any longer. And I'm like, okay. So we had that discussion. But remember that I'm not there. I don't know what you've used in there. But I want you to consider a couple of things. Okay, one is temperature, because you know that this is calibrated at 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So you may have a little bit of an off reading, okay, just based on temperature. But it's usually not that much. It's only about 3 points. The difference between 1.010 and 1.013. Okay? That would be the effect of temperature. And I'm talking about a wide range, like from 60 to 100 degrees. A 40-degree temperature change is only going to change it by that much. But it does make a difference if you're keeping accurate records. That's one thing that'll do that. Okay? The other thing that'll do that is, remember we've got our We got our fermenter here, and it's all full of something, whatever it is you put in it. But you've got this information, which is good. This will tell us something. But in that, you've got a lot of solid particulates. You've got things floating around, and not so much in a sugar wash. So in a sugar wash, usually you don't have this problem. But you do a lot of times in a grain or cereal or any damn thing else you've pulled out of the cabinet and figured you came up with the greatest recipe in the world. All right? But you've got it in there, and it's fermenting, and it stops at 1.010. Please take into consideration that you've got solid particulates floating around in there. That's going to change the viscosity of your fluid. All right? It's going to cause your hydrometer to float a little higher. It could float as much as 5 points, 1.005. It could float all the way up to 1.010, depending on what you've got in that mash. Although it's finished fermenting, your hydrometer just can't float any lower because you've got all that stuff in there. Now, added to that is, you see, we add this next complexity, which is that trapped CO2. CO2 gets trapped. Look, take a can of Coke, or I always say this, take a Sprite, pour it in a glass and watch it, and you'll see CO2 leaving. Yeah, it's leaving. Yeah. CO2 doesn't want to be there anymore than you want it in there, okay? So it wants to get out. But what happens to it in a mash? Same thing happens to it in a Sprite. Only so much will leave, and there'll be some left in there that'll attach itself to via their hydrogen bonds to your water molecules. And in this particular case, it's also going to attach itself to your solid particulates. So it's going to remain inside. You just got to get rid of it. And you get rid of it by just whipping it, beating it up. It's called degassing, okay? If you have a high level of CO2, residual CO2 inside your fermenter, that's also going to cause your hydrometer to float just a little bit higher. So it could be a function of all three of those: temperature, solid particulates, and CO2. All right? I got something to show you. I told you I was going to demonstrate this, and I'm going to demonstrate this. I'm going to show you exactly what we're talking about with solid particulates, because I have a demonstration to prove that solid particulates have an effect on hydrometer readings. Watch this. What I have done in preparation for this to demonstrate is I've taken some cornflakes. And yes, folks, you can use cornflakes to ferment. But what do you have to do to them? I know, it's a topic for another video, but you've got to convert the starches to fermentable sugars, okay? I took a cup and a half of cornflakes, and I've had them soak in this. First I put it in hot water so that it would break them down. And so I've got this solution. And this is the solution that you would have prior to doing anything. And what this represents is what is left in your aqueous solution, which is just a great term for in your water, if you just have cornflakes or flake corn or crack corn or any other product, you name it, rye, barley, wheat, go for it. But you've got, remember, your water is going to be loaded with other stuff, okay? It's not going to be just clear water any longer. So I've taken this and I haven't converted it yet. This is just the water itself, and I put it inside a cylinder. And I measure it with my hydrometer, and my hydrometer right now at probably about 72 degrees. And this is calibrated for 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So the difference is like 0.002. Not close enough for us to determine with a hydrometer, okay? It's not that far off. Your major change will take place above 110 degrees, and then it's still less than a point. All right, it should be reading 1.000 because it's water, but it's got cornflakes in it, or cornflake solid particulates, and I'm reading 1.003. Now, I'm reading 1.003 with just a little bit of cornflakes in water. So if I were to drop a hydrometer into my fermenter, and with that reading, I can make that mental leap. If I drop it into my fermenter and everything else is stopped, my fermentation is complete based on what we've already described, and it floats at 1.010. What does that really tell us? Am I finished? Now, more than likely you're finished. You've just got a lot of solid particulates in there. Now remember, two things that are going to cause your hydrometer to read just a little bit cattywampus or a little bit off. And that's going to be solid particulates and, of course, the captured CO2 that may be in your mash. So take that into consideration. That in a sugar wash, in a lot of cases, it'll float down to 1.000, even with your CO2 that's resident inside there. It doesn't take a whole lot, but keep that in mind. So now we understand a whole lot more about acidity, pH, hydrometer, strange readings from your hydrometer, and you should just be rest assured it's not the end of the world if you don't achieve 1.000. There could be other factors that are causing your hydrometer to read a little bit unpredictable. Okay? So sit back, enjoy. Please enjoy the fruits of your labor and share us with your friends. Of course, subscribe. There we go. That's the end of this. Happy distilling.